I pretended to be naive at work until one simple question ruined someone else's game. I used to think acting a little clueless at work was just a survival tactic. Smile, nod, ask harmless questions, let louder people feel brilliant. It kept me employed. It kept me unnoticed. For a long time, it even kept me safe. Then my manager learned how useful my innocence could be. My name is Marlowe Keene. I work in operations at a mid-sized tech company, big enough to have policies, small enough that the same handful of people decide what counts as urgent. My job is vendor coordination and purchase orders. Most days it's quiet, procedural, invisible. Until something breaks. And when something breaks, everyone suddenly remembers your name. My manager, Blaine Rourke, loved that part. Blaine was polished and loud in meetings, the kind of person who says, "I'll take point," with complete confidence, and then disappears the moment a decision turns into consequences. He spoke in clean phrases and vague promises. He also avoided putting anything in writing unless it made him look like the hero. The first time he tried to make me absorb his mess, it was a rush order for a hardware shipment. He told an engineering lead I'd confirmed a 3-day delivery window. I hadn't. The engineer came at me angry and sharp, like I'd personally sabotaged their project. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just pulled up the vendor email on my screen and showed the actual timeline. The engineer's expression changed, anger cooling into confusion. Right after that, Blaine messaged me. "Quick heads up. I may have overcommit. Just smooth it over." That was the rhythm. He overpromised, I absorbed the impact, everyone moved on. People forgot the details, but they remembered the feeling, something went wrong and I was nearby. A month later, it turned from annoying to personal. A software contract auto-renewed at a higher tier. Finance wanted to know why. Blaine pulled me into one of those glass rooms where everyone can see you talking but can't hear the words, and he lowered his voice like he was doing me a favor. "I need you to own this one," he said. "Just say you misunderstood the renewal date." I didn't argue. I felt my stomach drop, but I kept my face calm. I leaned into the role he'd built for me, the well-meaning employee who gets confused and needs guidance. "Okay," I said, like I was genuinely lost. "Can you forward me the email where I confirmed the date? I just want to make sure I'm looking at the same thing." His eyes flickered. "Just once." "There isn't an email," he said. It was verbal. I nodded slowly, like that made sense. Like it was normal for thousands of dollars to move based on a hallway sentence. Then I went back to my desk and started building something quiet, a timeline. Not revenge. Insurance. Dates. Meetings. Screenshots. Follow-ups. Little notes I could understand later when my memory tried to soften things. I kept it in a plain folder on my desktop with a boring name. I told myself I was being careful, not paranoid. The real trap came on a Thursday. Procurement had tightened approvals after a string of expensive surprises. New rules, competitive bids, documented justification, director sign-off. Blaine wanted a pricey agency for a marketing project and got told, "Not until you run bids." He decided the rules were optional. He told the agency to start work anyway, pending paperwork, and then tossed me a half-finished purchase order. "Get this through," he wrote. I already told them it's approved. It wasn't approved. It couldn't be. There were no bids. No sign-off. No justification. Just a giant invoice waiting to land on someone's desk like a grenade. I replied carefully in Slack, the way you do when you're trying not to sound like you're accusing your manager of setting you up. "I can submit it," I wrote, "but procurement will reject without bids. Do you want to pause the agency until we're compliant?" He didn't answer in writing. He called. I watched my phone ring and felt my pulse climb, because I knew why he preferred calls. Calls don't leave receipts. "Stop being difficult," he said the second I picked up. "Submit it. If they ask questions, tell them you thought bids were in progress. You don't need to understand the politics." There it was again, the script. Me, confused. Him, decisive. Everyone else, too busy to ask how the mess started. So I did exactly what he demanded, only I did it the safest way I could. I submitted the purchase order with the missing bids. I attached the Slack message where he told me to proceed. And in the notes section, I wrote one simple sentence. Submitting per Blaine Rourke's direction. Competitive bids not yet provided. Procurement rejected it 8 minutes later. 8. I hadn't even finished my coffee. Blaine appeared at my desk like a storm that learned to wear a smile. "Why would you send it like that?" he hissed. "You made me look bad." I looked up wide-eyed on purpose, keeping my voice small. "I thought you said it was approved," I said. I didn't want to misrepresent anything. Should I have left out that bids weren't provided? He clenched his jaw and glanced around like he suddenly remembered other people existed. Then his expression reset into something almost friendly. Just come to the meeting, he said. We'll discuss. A calendar invite hit my inbox 30 seconds later. PO approval alignment. Attendees, me, Blaine, Procurement Director, Finance Partner, HR Business Partner, and the COO. Boardroom at Monday. 9 a.m. I stared at the invite longer than I should have. The COO, Stanton Bly, didn't show up for anything below fire level. If his name was on that list, it meant someone above Blaine had finally noticed the smoke. Blaine walked past my desk an hour later, too cheerful, like he'd already written the story. Don't worry, he said, tapping my monitor with 2 fingers. Just be honest in there. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. That phrase always came right before someone tried to make me complicated. All weekend, I did the least glamorous prep imaginable. I printed the purchase order submission. I printed the Slack thread. I pulled the procurement policy from the internal site and highlighted the section about competitive bids and approvals. I saved everything twice. Then I put it all in a plain folder like I was a student showing up to office hours. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I wanted one thing, for the truth to exist in that room in a way nobody could talk around. Monday morning, I arrived early, not to impress, just to breathe. I drank bad coffee and let my pulse settle. At 8:58, I picked up the folder and walked to Boardroom A. For the first time in months, I didn't feel nervous. I felt ready. Boardroom A smelled like dry marker ink and over-air-conditioned carpet. The kind of room where decisions get made fast, and accountability gets moved even faster. I took a seat near the end of the table, folder closed, hands resting on top of it like I didn't quite know what to do with them. That was part of the posture, the version of me Blaine preferred, quiet, agreeable, easy to assign things to. People filed in with the usual order of importance. Procurement first, already tense. Finance after that, careful and tired. HR last, neutral face, pen ready. Everyone avoided looking directly at me, like acknowledging me would force them to choose a side before the meeting even started. Blaine came in last, holding his coffee like it was a prop. He was still laughing at something on his phone, the kind of laugh designed to be heard. He sat down like this was his room. At exactly 9 o'clock, the COO, Stanton Bly, walked in. No greeting. No small talk. He nodded once, sat, and said, "Let's begin." Blaine didn't wait for permission. "So, this should be quick," he said, leaning back. We had a purchase order submitted that didn't meet procurement standards. Some confusion around process. We're here to clear it up and move forward. The wording was smooth. No direct accusation. Just implication floating in the air like perfume. The procurement director, Nedra Lott, opened her laptop. "The issue is straightforward," she said. An agency was engaged without competitive bids or director approval. That's a policy violation. Blaine nodded like he was listening deeply. Right. And we're addressing that. The submission came from my team, but, he paused, eyes drifting toward me like a spotlight with manners, there was a breakdown in understanding the updated requirements. All eyes shifted. I felt the old pressure rise, say you misunderstood, apologize, absorb it. The emotional math was familiar. If I played the part, this would end quickly. Blaine would look reasonable. Everyone would walk out relieved that the problem had a name, and the name wasn't theirs. I could almost hear his voice from the hallway. Keep it simple. So I did. I'm sorry, I said softly. Can I ask a clarifying question? Stanton looked at me for the first time. Go ahead. I kept my tone genuinely unsure, like I was trying to learn. When you say a breakdown in understanding, do you mean I misunderstood the policy, or that the policy wasn't followed? Silence landed hard. Blaine jumped in immediately. The policy is complex, he said. It changes. That's why ops manages the details. I nodded slowly, as if that explained everything. Okay. Then just so I'm clear, if I receive an instruction to submit a PO before bids are complete, what is the correct action? Nedra answered before Blaine could. You do not submit. You pause the work until bids and approvals are in place. Got it, I said. I opened my folder. Not dramatically. Not like a courtroom reveal. Just, calmly. That's what I thought. Blaine shifted in his chair. I don't think we need hypotheticals. I agree, I said quickly, almost eager. I just want to understand what I should have done differently. I slid one sheet out and placed it on the table angled toward Nedra and Stanton. This is the PO submission. In the notes, I mentioned bids weren't provided yet. Nedra leaned in to read. The finance partner, Calder Voss, leaned in too. Blaine frowned. Why would you include that? I looked up at him, confused on purpose. Because bids weren't provided. I didn't want to state something untrue. Stanton's gaze moved from the paper to Blaine. Did you instruct Marlowe to submit without bids? Blaine let out a sharp little laugh. That's not what happened. We discussed timing. Marlowe misunderstood urgency. I nodded, like relief. Oh. Then maybe this will help. I pulled out the email. The one where Blaine wrote, "Get this through." I already told them it's approved. I didn't read it aloud. I didn't announce it. I didn't add commentary. I just placed it next to the PO and said, quietly, this was the direction I was working from. That's why I was confused. The room went still in a way that felt physical. HR stopped writing. Finance's laptop lowered halfway like he didn't want a screen between him and the truth. Nedra read the email once, then again, slower. Like she was checking if the words might rearrange themselves into something less damning. Blaine's face changed, not panic, not anger. Calculation. The expression of someone deciding which version of reality would cost him less. That email was taken out of context, he said. We were under time pressure. Stanton raised a hand. Context doesn't override policy. Blaine leaned forward, voice controlled but sharper now. Look, this is turning into something it doesn't need to be. I didn't think it was malicious, I said immediately. I just wanted to follow process. That's when Stanton turned fully toward me. Has this happened before? He asked. I hesitated, not too long, just long enough to seem uncertain. I'm not sure, I said. Similar situations, I guess. I usually try to smooth things over when there's confusion. Blaine's eyes cut toward me, a warning without words. But the room had already shifted. It wasn't mine to control anymore. Nedra spoke carefully. We've had 3 rejected submissions from this team in the last quarter. All missing the same requirements. Calder nodded. And 2 vendor escalations. Stanton exhaled through his nose like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. Okay, he said. Here's what we're going to do. Blaine started to speak, then stopped when Stanton continued without looking at him. We're pausing this engagement. Procurement will review prior submissions from this team. HR, I want a compliance check on approvals and direction of work. He turned to me. And I don't think you should be reporting into this process anymore. I blinked once. I'm sorry. You followed policy, Stanton said. You documented. You flagged risk. That's what we want. He looked at Nedra. Move Marlowe under procurement temporarily. Blaine went pale. That's not necessary. Stanton didn't look at him. It is. No one spoke after that. Not because they were ordered silent, because there was nothing left to spin. The meeting didn't end with shouting. It ended the way real damage usually does, quietly, with action items and calendar holds. By noon, my reporting line had changed in the system. No announcement. Just, moved. New channels appeared in my chat sidebar. New permissions. New access. It felt like my job had been quietly relocated while I was still sitting in the same chair. Blaine didn't message me. Didn't check in. For someone who lived on control, the silence was loud. At 2 p.m. HR sent me a 15-minute invite, process review, informational. I brought the same folder. I didn't add anything. I didn't need to. The HR partner, Jocelyn Prent, asked questions with a calm voice and very sharp eyes. Had I been instructed to proceed without approvals? Had I been asked to smooth things over with vendors or internal teams? Had I been pressured to accept blame for decisions I didn't make? I answered plainly. Dates. Phrases. What was said? What was avoided? When I didn't remember something perfectly, I said, I don't recall the exact wording. Jocelyn nodded and kept writing anyway. At the end, she looked up and said, you didn't do anything wrong. I want to be very clear. I thanked her and walked back to my desk, what used to be my desk, feeling like I'd stepped out of a room where the air pressure was different. And somewhere in the building, Blaine was realizing that the story he'd been building needed a new ending. By Wednesday morning, the office no longer felt neutral. It felt like a place holding its breath. No announcement had gone out. No rumor email. No leadership message about process improvements or organizational clarity. But something invisible had shifted. Conversations lowered when certain names came up. Meetings suddenly had agendas. People started saying things like, let's put that in writing, as if the words themselves had acquired weight overnight. I stayed where I was told. Procurement. Temporary, on paper. Permanent in practice. The first thing they asked me to do wasn't dramatic. No investigation, no confrontation. They asked me to help map purchase order workflows for the last 6 months. What went where? Who approved what? Where things stalled? Where exceptions appeared? It was quiet work. Methodical. Dates. Timestamps. Threads pulled from internal tools. The kind of work that doesn't feel powerful while you're doing it, but becomes undeniable when finished. Patterns don't announce themselves. They repeat. 3 rejected submissions from Blaine's team, all missing the same approvals. 2 escalations where vendors had already begun work before contracts existed. 1 renewal that slid through because someone said it was fine, but no one could say who. Every thread pointed the same way. Not loudly. Not accusatory. Just consistently. I wasn't asked to interpret any of it. Just to help make it legible. By late morning, a finance analyst named Rhea Tolson stopped me by the coffee machine. She looked around first, then said quietly, "Rough week, huh?" I shrugged. "Seems busy." She gave a tight smile. "For some people." At 11:17 a.m. Blaine was pulled into a glass conference room. HR legal. Door closed. Nobody stared. Nobody needed to. I wasn't invited. I didn't want to be. That hour stretched in a strange way. Not tense. Just suspended. The office continued operating around the absence like a city rerouting traffic after an accident. People adapted quickly when they realized nothing was being said out loud. When Blaine came out, his calendar went blank. Not emptied. Blank. No meetings. No holds. No placeholders. That's when it stopped being abstract. This wasn't about one purchase order. It never had been. It was about how often urgency had been used to bypass process, how frequently accountability had been shifted downward, and how many near misses had been quietly absorbed by someone else willing to be misunderstood. This time, the absorption failed. By Friday afternoon, an internal message went out. Carefully written. Bloodless. Blaine Reeve will be transitioning out of his role. Interim leadership has been assigned. Process reviews are underway. No reasons. No explanations. No invitations to speculate. A few people congratulated me quietly. Not for winning. For surviving. But the real change didn't come with that message. It came later, when Stanton Bly stopped by procurement unannounced. He didn't make a show of it. No entourage. No announcement. He leaned against a desk, asked how the week had gone, listened more than he spoke. When he was about to leave, he turned to me. "You did the right thing by documenting," he said. "Most people don't." "I wasn't trying to make waves," I replied. He smiled faintly. "You didn't. You just stopped absorbing them." That sentence stayed with me longer than anything else. That night, I went home earlier than usual. No follow-ups. No late messages. No adrenaline keeping me alert. I sat on my couch and realized I wasn't bracing for Monday. That alone felt unfamiliar. Monday arrived quietly. Over the weekend, my reporting line had been finalized. Procurement officially, with a dotted line to the COO for cross-functional issues. No announcement. Just a calendar update and a new set of priorities that made sense. Blaine's name disappeared from systems the way companies prefer, completely. No farewell email. No, thank you for your contributions. By Tuesday, someone else had his office. I didn't feel triumphant. Mostly, I felt lighter. The compliance review wrapped quickly, not because it was rushed, but because the trail was clean. Emails. Messages. Rejections. Escalations. No speculation required. HR closed my portion with one sentence in writing. No findings. No corrective action required. I printed it and put it in the same folder I'd brought to the meeting. Then I closed the folder and didn't open it again. People started treating me differently after that. Not better. Not worse. More carefully. When someone asked me to just push something through, they followed it with, "if that's okay by policy." When they weren't sure, they checked first. I stopped being the shock absorber. 2 weeks later, Stanton asked me to sit in on a vendor review. Not to present. Just to observe. Halfway through, a director suggested skipping a step to keep momentum. Stanton looked at me. Thoughts? I didn't hesitate. We can do that, I said. But it creates risk downstream. If we wait 48 hours, we stay compliant and still hit the deadline. He nodded. Then we wait. No debate. No side conversations. Just a decision. After the meeting, he walked with me back toward procurement. You know why that worked? He asked. Because you backed it, I said. He shook his head. Because you explained the cost. You weren't defensive. You weren't vague. You didn't play naive, but you also didn't play aggressive. That night, something clicked. I hadn't stopped acting naive because I wanted to prove anything. I'd stopped because I didn't need the armor anymore. A month later, I passed Blaine in the lobby. He looked smaller somehow. Not defeated. Just ordinary. He nodded once, like two strangers who had once shared a long delay in an airport terminal. I nodded back. No words. I didn't replay the meeting after that. Didn't rewrite conversations in my head. Didn't imagine better lines. The story was finished. Workdays became quieter. Fewer emergencies. More clarity. When something went wrong, it was discussed, fixed, documented, and owned by the person who made the call. At home, I slept better. Here's the part no one tells you about moments like that meeting: the power isn't in the silence that follows. It's in what doesn't happen afterward. No retaliation. No whispered blame. No constant second-guessing yourself. Just a system correcting course because someone finally stopped carrying weight that was never theirs. I didn't beat management. I didn't outsmart anyone. I asked one honest question, backed it with the truth, and let it sit in the room. And when the room went quiet, for the first time, I didn't rush to fill it. The weeks after Blaine's exit didn't feel celebratory. They felt recalibrated. That's the only word that fits. Not relieved. Not victorious. Rebalanced. Authority didn't move with announcements or org charts. It shifted in small, almost boring ways. Who people asked before acting. Who they copied on emails. Who they waited for when decisions stalled. I noticed it first in my inbox. Requests came in framed differently. Less, "Can you just handle this?" and more, "Can you advise?" People started attaching context instead of assumptions. When something urgent popped up, it came with documentation already attached, as if everyone had quietly agreed that urgency without evidence was no longer impressive. Procurement meetings changed tone too. Fewer monologues. More pauses. Someone would suggest a shortcut, then stop themselves mid-sentence and say, "Actually, let's check policy first." Not because they were afraid, because they'd learned the cost of pretending rules were flexible when they weren't. I didn't correct people. I didn't remind them what happened. I just did my work the same way I always had, except now I wasn't shielding anyone from consequences. That distinction mattered. A director named Caleb Monroe asked me one afternoon if I'd review a vendor escalation before it went to leadership. He leaned against the doorway of my workspace, hesitant. "I don't want to step on anything," he said. "Just want to make sure we're clean." I scanned the documents. "You're missing one approval," I said. "If you send it like this, it'll bounce." He nodded. "Thanks for catching that." That was it. No spin. No pressure. No suggestion that I could just fix it quietly. Later that day, I realized something subtle but important. My workload hadn't increased. The emotional load had decreased. I wasn't absorbing confusion anymore. I wasn't translating chaos into calm for other people. Everyone was doing their own part. That's what accountability feels like when it's working. About a month in, HR closed the broader compliance review. No mass email. No dramatic findings. Just a short update to leadership with recommendations for clearer approval pathways and mandatory documentation standards. Translation: the system adjusted without needing a villain. I appreciated that more than I expected. One afternoon, Maribel Quinn from finance sat across from me in a small conference room, reviewing a renewal timeline. "I want to say something," she said carefully. "And I don't want it to sound strange." "Go ahead. You made it safer to tell the truth here." I didn't know what to say to that. So I just nodded. She continued. "Not because you reported anyone. Because you didn't cover things up. There's a difference." She was right. Silence can be protective or destructive. The difference is intent. A few weeks later, Stanton asked me to join a cross-functional planning group. Not as a representative. As a constraint. That was his word. He smiled when he said it, like it wasn't an insult. "I don't want optimism in that room," he explained. "I want reality. I joined the group reluctantly. I'd never seen myself as someone who belonged in strategic conversations. But once I was there, I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't new to this level of thinking. I'd just been excluded from it before. When someone proposed a timeline, I asked what assumptions it relied on. When a budget was floated, I asked where the risk lived. Not aggressively. Just plainly. No one rolled their eyes. No one talked over me. Decisions slowed slightly, and improved dramatically. Around that time, I found the old folder in my drawer. The one with printed emails, policies, timelines. I opened it once, flipped through the pages, then closed it again. I didn't need it anymore. One evening, as I was packing up to leave, I ran into Ria again near the elevators. "You seem lighter," she said. "I am." She hesitated. "Can I ask you something personal?" I shrugged. "Sure. Why didn't you say anything sooner?" The question wasn't accusatory. It was curious. I thought about it. Because I thought staying quiet was the same as being safe. She nodded slowly. "And now?" "Now I know it's just quieter." That distinction followed me home. Safety isn't silence. It's stability. It's knowing that if something goes wrong, you won't be asked to carry it alone. I stopped being careful with my questions after that. Not reckless. Just honest. If something didn't make sense, I said so. If a request violated policy, I flagged it early. Not defensively. Just clearly. And something unexpected happened. People started trusting me, not because I was agreeable, but because I was predictable. Predictability is underrated. It's the foundation of trust in systems and people alike. Late one Friday afternoon, Stanton sent me a short message. "Thanks for holding the line. It matters." I stared at it for a long moment. I hadn't felt like I was holding anything. I'd just stopped bending. That weekend, I realized how much energy bending had cost me. The constant scanning. The mental rehearsals. The internal bargaining. All gone. Work was still work. Deadlines still existed. Mistakes still happened. But they landed where they belonged. Justice, I learned, isn't loud in professional spaces. It doesn't come with applause or dramatic exits. It arrives quietly, in the form of alignment. By the time I noticed my confidence had changed, it was already normal. I wasn't bracing anymore. I was participating. And when I looked ahead, for the first time, the future at work didn't feel like something I had to survive. It felt like something I could shape. The real change didn't announce itself. It settled in. Weeks passed, then months, and nothing dramatic happened. No public praise, no career montage, no sudden title jump. And that was exactly how I knew it was real. Stability is quiet. My role solidified under procurement, but not in a limiting way. It expanded sideways instead of upward. I became someone teams checked with before decisions, not after things broke. I wasn't copied on emails for optics. I was included because clarity reduced risk. That kind of trust doesn't feel exciting at first. It feels anticlimactic. But over time, it becomes something better than excitement. It becomes peace. I stopped second-guessing every meeting invite. Stopped replaying conversations in my head on the commute home. When I left the office, my work stayed there. No more Sunday night dread. No more rehearsing how to defend myself against things I hadn't even done yet. One afternoon, a junior coordinator named Hollis Reed asked if she could sit with me during lunch. She looked nervous, twisting the lid of her water bottle like it might explode. "I don't want to mess up," she said. "But sometimes it feels like if I ask questions, I'll look incompetent." I recognized that fear instantly. It used to live in my chest. I told her the truth. Asking questions doesn't make you look incompetent. It just reveals who was hoping you wouldn't. She laughed, then went quiet. "I wish someone had told me that earlier." "So do I," I said. That conversation mattered more to me than any formal recognition. Not because I'd become a mentor. But because I'd broken a cycle. Over time, people stopped testing my boundaries. Not because I was firm or intimidating, but because I was consistent. If something wasn't compliant, the answer didn't change depending on who asked or how urgent it felt. No drama. No lectures. Just facts. Consistency is harder to argue with than confidence. About 6 months after everything settled, Stanton asked me into his office. Not a meeting, just a conversation. "You've changed how people move through decisions," he said. "They slow down now." I smiled. "That's usually when mistakes stop." He nodded. "I want to formalize part of what you're doing." Build it into process instead of personality. That mattered. Because systems shouldn't rely on individuals being brave. They should protect people by default. We worked together to document escalation paths, approval thresholds, and accountability handoffs. Dry stuff. Necessary stuff. The kind of structure that prevents quiet exploitation from taking root. When it was done, I felt a kind of satisfaction that had nothing to do with ego. The system would hold even if I wasn't there. That was the real win. Months later, I ran into Blaine again, outside the building, near the crosswalk. He looked fine. Not broken. Not bitter. Just another person moving on. We nodded at each other. No resentment rose up. No urge to explain or justify. The story didn't need revisiting. I realized then that closure isn't a conversation. It's indifference. At work, my reputation became simple and precise. If you wanted something rushed, I'd explain the cost. If you wanted something done right, I'd help you do it. If you wanted someone else to take the fall, I wasn't available. People learned quickly which lane I occupied. And the strange thing was, once I stopped being useful as a shield, I became useful as a partner. That's the part no one warns you about. When you stop absorbing damage, you don't become isolated. You become clearer. And clarity attracts the right kind of collaboration. The final shift happened quietly, on an ordinary Wednesday. I was in a meeting when a director suggested pushing through a change without full review. Old habits flickered in the room. A few people glanced at me. Not expectantly. Reassuringly. I spoke up. We can do that. But here's what it risks, and here's what waiting one day protects. The director nodded. Okay. We'll wait. No tension. No pushback. Just alignment. On the walk home that evening, I thought about who I'd been when I started there. The version of me who thought survival meant shrinking. Who believed safety came from being overlooked. I understood her better now. She wasn't weak. She was adapting. But adaptation has an expiration date. Eventually, you either grow into the space you occupy, or you disappear inside it. I didn't become louder. I didn't become aggressive. I didn't win. I became visible on my own terms. And the satisfaction that followed wasn't sharp or triumphant. It was steady. Durable. The kind that doesn't fade when the adrenaline does. Justice didn't arrive as punishment. It arrived as balance. I no longer carried things that weren't mine. I no longer made myself smaller to make others comfortable. And I no longer confused silence with safety. The story didn't end with applause. It ended with something better. A system that worked. A reputation built on truth. And a quiet certainty that I would never need to pretend not to understand again. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.